Hello, and welcome back to Spin Cycle Live. I'm your host, Nathan Hale. Today, we have quite the stories for you. We are still away from the normal set. I know, it's scary to see a new background, but alas, the last day we'll be here with this background. Next week, we'll be back to normal groove of things. You will see the Lego again behind me all lit up like a beautiful city skyline. But how are you all doing today? Today is Wednesday, March 26th, 2025. Hope you are all doing so good. I hope your week is going the way that you'd like it to be going. I hope that you're enjoying this Wednesday. I hope you can see the end of the week is near. We're almost there. We're almost at the weekend. We're all working for it. But let me know how you're doing. Hope you're doing good. If you didn't know already, the show is being posted on Rumble, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, of course, X. We also have a TikTok that we're posting show clips to. So if you're not already following all of us there, make sure you are doing so. All right, let's get right into our first story of the week, which is going to be from The Independent. It is about a ban on sexually explicit content within schools. Let me scoot over a little bit. All right, so let's start reading through this. Where's my mouse cursor at? All right, here we go. So from The Independent. So Iowa law banning school library books that depict sex acts on hold again after a new federal ruling. Iowa cannot, for now, continue to enforce part of its book ban law, a federal judge said Tuesday, giving major publishers that sued the state the second temporary reprieve they requested. The new decision from the U.S. District Judge Stephen Locker again temporarily blocked the part of the law that prohibits school libraries and classrooms from carrying books that depict sex acts. The law, which was first approved by Iowa's Republican-led legislature and GOP Governor Kim Reynolds in 2023, but key parts, including the book ban, were temporarily blocked by Locker before they became enforceable. The decision was overturned in August by the U.S. Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals, meaning the law has been enforceable during the current school year. The appellate court told the lower court that it failed to apply the correct analysis in determining whether to temporarily block the law. In Locker's decision Tuesday, he stated that the unconstitutional applications of the book restrictions far exceeded the constitutional applications under both legal standards the court believes are applicable. Expecting an appeal, Locker also included an alternative standard where the restrictions could be considered constitutional, but added he does not believe it should be applied in this case. I really cannot believe the amount of people who literally stand behind putting books that have sexually explicit content into schools and into classrooms and into libraries, right? They tout that this is all about book banning and that we are banning books, we are taking books away from people, we're making them inaccessible. There's a difference between a book ban and banning sexually explicit books in schools and classrooms and libraries, right? There's a difference between that. There's a difference between saying, hey, you cannot go out and buy this book on Amazon. You cannot have this book in your home. You cannot own this material for yourself. And we're not going to spend taxpayer money on these books to stock them in classrooms, in schools, in classrooms. We're not going to allow children to be able to potentially accidentally read through these books, right? There's a difference between both of those things, and I really cannot believe that so many Democrats stand beside these books, right? You know, looking at it from my perspective, I don't really have an issue if I have more of an issue if you take books out of schools that show normal relationships, right? So a lot of perspective that has been on this is that, hey, we're taking away books that are showing like gay relationships and stuff in schools, right? So that kids are only seeing, the normal, which is, a straight relationship, and they're not getting to see that there's this whole other world out there and it's okay to be like this, right? But that's what I have an issue with, which is, hey, leave the books in that are showing normal relationships, be that gay or straight, right? Leave the books in there that have, regular things that people are going through. But a lot of these books that are being banned in schools literally show how to do sexually explicit activities, such as putting on a condom, such as having oral sex, right? Doing things like that. And that is just not something that should be within schools. It's not something that we should be promoting to minors. That is something that really, I mean, we ban porn for people under 18. This is basically that. It's literally exactly the same thing. They're showing graphical depictions of actual acts to kids, right? This should also be banned in schools. A lot of people have talked about like the Heartstopper books, for instance. I think the Heartstopper books are actually great. I've read all of them myself. They're not sexually explicit. I would say they're more of like a 14 plus book, right? But people have kind of brought those up, and I think that those are great representations of what kind of life is like right now in the world, at least from the perspective of someone who, might be gay. So I don't have an issue with those books being in schools. I think those are a great example of ones that are perfectly fine to stay, right? But books like, they're not coming to mind off the top of my head. I'd have to have the list in front of me. I have it somewhere. But books that have those sexually explicit materials in them, you can go look at. Gays Against Groomers has a great resource about all of them on their website, I believe. Those books definitely need to be banned in schools. Kids should not have access to them. And that's all I have to say about that. Let's go ahead and move on to our next story, which is about, this comes from Reuters. If the story will load for me. Hello? All right, here we go. So Trump likely to use 2019 probe to justify tariffs on auto imports. U.S. President Donald Trump's administration is likely to use a trade investigation completed during his first term in office to justify auto tariffs that he planned to announce on Wednesday. Industry experts and former U.S. officials said. White House spokesperson Caroline Leavitt told reporters that Trump plans to hold a news conference at 4 p.m. in the Oval Office to announce tariffs on the auto industry. The U.S. president has long promised higher duties on imported cars, and the announcement's timing suggests that they would coincide with his separate April 2nd plans for reciprocal tariffs aimed at the countries responsible for the bulk of the U.S. trade deficit. An auto import tariff of 25%, the level floated by Trump in February, would send shockwaves through a global industry that is already reeling from uncertainty caused by Trump's rapid-fire tariff threats and occasional reversals. Tariffs could also drive up the cost of a car by thousands of dollars, hitting new vehicle sales and resulting in job losses because of the U.S. auto industry's heavy reliance on the imported parts, according to the Center for Automotive Research. The U.S. imported $474 billion worth of automotive products in 2024, including passenger cars worth $220 billion. Mexico, Japan, South Korea, Canada, and Germany, all close U.S. allies, were the biggest suppliers. So once again, I feel like I talk about tariffs a lot. That's really what's in the news right now. There's been a lot of news coverage about all of these tariffs that are going into place, and we're already seeing some changes. So I talked about Wednesday how Hyundai is going to be investing, I think, $20 billion or something like that into U.S. manufacturing because of the tariffs going into place. This is great, right? This is exactly what the U.S. economy needs. The point of the tariffs is to bring in U.S. U.S.-based businesses or businesses into the United States to create more jobs, to create a better, stronger economy for us as Americans, right? And to hurt the rest of the world, essentially. So at least make life better for us as Americans. So I think that is great. What we still have not seen yet is the long-term implication of how these tariffs are going to play out. I suspect, we had a lot of tariffs during the first Trump administration. Things seem to work out pretty well after that. I suspect we'll see about the same moves coming from all these tariffs. I suspect that we will have a lot of companies coming into the United States, building new factories, putting new investment into the country, right? So that these tariffs don't hit U.S. buyers nearly as much. We've seen all these reports saying that buyers are going to be, paying X amount more money per year because of all these tariffs. And what I think that a lot of those reports forget to discuss is that we're consumers. We're all case by case basis. There are a lot of people who are not buying cars on a yearly basis, right, or even every 5 years, for instance, right. My family, myself, I have personally driven the same car. My car was purchased back in 2003, right. It has 250,000 miles on it. All of our family's cars have been purchased over I think 7 years ago, right? So we keep cars for quite a while. I feel like that's the case for a lot of Americans. So the tariffs going in on automakers and everything, I really don't feel like is going to impact Americans nearly as much as a lot of reports would like to say they are. Other tariffs being put in place on a lot of products coming from China, I think that will impact Americans more, especially things coming in from Mexico too. We get a lot of produce and stuff from South America. So things like that, I feel like will impact people a lot more. But the complaints that the U.S. tariffs on the car market are really going to impact us as everyday Americans. I'm not totally buying it yet. Like I said, the man has only been in office for a few months now. Get back to me in a year. We'll see what the tariffs have done to our economy at that point, right? Because that will be when Congress starts campaigning again, and we'll see when they start campaigning if they're talking about how great the tariffs were for our economy or not. So it'll be interesting to see. But that's all I got to say on tariffs. I talk about them a lot. But let's go ahead and move on to our next case. So next story. So this comes from the Daily Wire. So the Supreme Court upholds restrictions on ghost guns. On Wednesday, in a 7-2 decision, the Supreme Court upheld federal restrictions aimed at ghost guns. So a ghost gun, if you don't know what that is, it's basically a gun that does not have a serial number. It is not registered with any source. There's been a huge increase with home 3D printing in manufacturing firearms at home. With 3D printers yourself, that can actually be really dangerous, right? Especially if you're printing them entirely out of plastic. They go through metal detectors and everything. They're not necessarily getting spotted. Another way of a ghost gun being produced is by purchasing parts on the aftermarket and assembling a slurry of parts together to create a firearm that way. So there's from what I understand, there's a big community out there of people who do stuff like this, who create custom firearms out of parts like this that have no ill intention to them. But there's also a lot of criminals out there too who are making guns or acquiring a weapon that's not registered with any source to go and commit crimes. So short little summary on ghost guns. Do your own research on it, but that's my understanding of it as someone who is not an expert with firearms at all. So in April 2022, the Biden administration announced that its DOJ had issued a, quote, final rule to rein in the proliferation of ghost guns. Quote, this final rule bans the business and manufacturing the most accessible ghost guns, such as unserialized buy-built shot kits that individuals can buy online or at a store without a background check and can reliably assemble into a working firearm in as little as 30 minutes with equipment they have at home. The Biden White House noted, adding, quote, the final rule will also help turn some ghost guns already into circulation into serialized firearms. Quote, in 2022, the Bureau of Alcohol, Firearms, and Tobacco and Explosives, ATF, adopted a rule interpreting the Ghost Gun Act of 1968, to cover weapon parts kits that are designed to do or may readily be converted to expel a projectile, and a partially complete, disassembled, or non-functional frames or receivers. The Supreme Court noted on Wednesday, gun manufacturers and others filed a facial challenge contending that the Gun Control Act of 1968 could not read or reach weapons kits or unfinished frames or receivers. The Supreme Court held, quote, the ATF's rule is not facially inconsistent with the GCA. Quote, in recent years, however, we have witnessed profound changes in how guns are made and sold, the majority opinion stated. Quote, when Congress adopted the GCA in 1968, the milling equipment, materials needed, and designs were far too expensive for individuals to make firearms, particularly and reliably on their own. With the introduction of new technology like 3D printing and reinforced polymers, that is no longer true. Justice Clarence Thomas, who dissented along with Samuel Alito, contended, quote, the government asked the court just last term to, quote, rewrite the statutory text so that it could regulate semi-automatic weapons as machine guns. We decided to do so. The government now asks us to rewrite statutory text so that it can regulate weapons parts kits. This time, the court obliges. I would not. The statutory terms frames and receiver do not cover the unfinished frames and receivers contained in weapons parts kits. The weapons parts kits themselves do not meet the statutory definition of firearm. They should end the case. The majority instead blessed the government's overreach on a series of errors both regarding the standard of review and the interpretation of the statute. I respectfully dissent. So I'm interested to see what a lot of gun experts on the internet have to say about this. I suspect they're not going to be all too happy about it. When it comes down to it, I don't have an issue with guns that are being 3D printed or these very powerful weapons from being acquired by people without a background check, right? I don't think you should be able to 3D print a gun in your home, take it around public and everything, right? Don't do that. It sounds like a good idea to me, right? I'm in favor of knowing who owns guns, knowing that you can't get a gun without a background check, and making the process more standardized for allowing people to get guns legally and easier for them to do so. I'm totally okay with that. So I'm interested to know the actual implications for how ghost guns and how banning this actually impacts gun ownership and people who are really active in doing things like this. From my perspective, I don't really see an issue with saying, my understanding is that, we're saying that, hey, you can't go and 3D print a gun, and that you can't just buy these weapons parts kits and assemble a fully functioning firearm without a background check that don't have serial numbers. We don't know where this gun is. We don't know who it belongs to. We don't know any of this, right? So I don't really see all that much an issue with that. That doesn't really feel like a Second Amendment violation to me, right? We're not saying, hey, you can't go out and buy a gun legally. You can't go out and buy a gun that's registered. We're just saying that it has to be registered. We have to know who owns these weapons. I don't really see the issue in that. I can kind of see the libertarian perspective. Hey, I don't want the government knowing about anything that I purchased. But I personally don't have an issue with the government knowing that, hey, I own a firearm, right? All right. Moving on to our next story. So this is from CNN Business. I know CNN Business, but I like the article, so we're just going to cover the facts. We're not going to get into all the opinion bias in this article, but CNN Business. So over 9 million student loan borrowers could see their credit scores tank as delinquencies are poised to hit record highs. Student loan delinquencies are poised to hit record highs, and more than 9 million borrowers could see their credit scores tank in the first quarter of the year, according to new data released Wednesday. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York released its latest biennial report that tracks student loan debt loads, delinquencies, and related impacts to credit scores. The latest report provides a snapshot of student loan activity after it was completely upended by the 2019 COVID-19 pandemic. The 2025 student loan update showed that the estimated 15.6% of federal loans, a new record, were likely past due at the end of the year, with more than $250 billion in delinquency debt held by 9.7 million borrowers. The New York Fed's estimates are based on the federal student aid data available through September 30th, 2024. The FSA's fourth quarter data is expected to be available after March 31st, research noted. New student loan delinquencies have been shown to take massive bites out of credit scores, with deductions averaging 87 points for subprime borrowers and steep 171-point knocks for those with super prime or excellent credit standing. The pandemic provided a reprieve for millions of student loan borrowers. A stimulus check and payment pauses allowed many of them to bring down their balances. Other loans, however, were stuck in limbo and became a political football as the Biden administration's plans for student loan forgiveness hit a wall of legal challenges. The 3.5-year payment plan pause ended in September 2023. However, an additional provision under the Biden administration provided a 1-year on-ramp where borrowers were shielded from negative effects of a massive payment. That grace period ended on September 30th, 2024. And based on the New York Fed's findings, the indications that many borrowers were not paying their loans at the same rate as they were pre-pandemic. The potential for negative credit score impacts grew greater. All right. My feeling on all this, I'm a college student. I have taken out student loans from the Fed. I understand where this comes from, right? My feeling on all this is that this is a loan that you took out from the government. You are entitled to be paying it back on a regularly scheduled basis, just like you would be with any other loan. And there are penalties you're not doing so, right? I'm paying back my loans right now as I'm still in college. I'm still sending payments to them to start to bring down my principal until I graduate. Because basically what happens is if you graduate, you start getting hit with interest from all these student loans really hard. And that can be really detrimental to people who've taken out a lot of money in student loans. But a lot of people taking out a lot of money in student loans also tend to be in majors that don't pay all that much after they graduate, right? They're in English majors, they're in criminal justice majors, they are doing things like gender studies, ethnic studies, underwater ethnic basket weaving, right? So I think that this will come as I don't really have an issue with this, right? You need to be paying back your loans after you graduate. I'm so glad that I haven't heard anything about student loan cancellations or student loan forgiveness floating around the air recently, right? If you take out a loan, you need to pay it back in the appropriate amount of time based on the terms and conditions you agreed to. Otherwise, you shouldn't be taking out that loan, right? I knew exactly what I was getting myself into when I took out a loan. I understood the risk I was taking on when I did so. I feel like a lot of people take out these loans and they don't realize the risk that they're under. Or they heard 4 years of the Biden administration saying that, hey, we're going to forgive all of your student loans. We're going to forgive all this, blah, 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 blah. And not actually doing so. And they're still stuck in that mindset of, hey, my loans are going to be forgiven, so I'm just going to sit back and I'm not going to pay them or anything. I'm just going to wait and see if they get forgiven or not, because why would I waste my money paying a loan if it's going to get all forgiven? So that's truly why I think the whole student loan forgiveness thing is so detrimental, because I'm sure a lot of these people, if you went and asked them, were not paying their loans at the same rate they were pre-COVID, because that was pre-Joe Biden. And during Joe Biden, we heard nothing but student loan forgiveness. And a lot of people stopped paying their loans in hopes that this would come true and their loans would be forgiven. So that's all I got to say about that. Let's move on to our last story of the week, and then we will be out of here. So this comes from Newsmax. RNC seeks voter roll data for 48 states and D.C. The Republican National Committee on Tuesday sent its largest ever request for records to voter rolls, submitting requests to 48 states as well as Washington, D.C. The RNC is once again taking action to make our elections more secure, RNC Chairman Michael Whatley said per a press release. Quote, voters have a right to know what their states are properly maintaining voter rolls and quickly acting to learn voter registration lists by removing ineligible voters. If states unlawfully block our requests, or if we discover that states have failed to accurately maintain their voter rolls, the RNC stands ready to act. This is great. This is great. I am super excited to hear how this turns out. I'm excited to see what states have voter rolls that are inaccurate, or how many states abide by this. I'm sure that the Republican states are going to be very easy to hand over their voter rolls and everything and let people sift through them and figure out, look through all those data points. I'm interested to see how many of the Democrat states are going to stand against the RNC's request in all of this. It will really say a lot about how they personally feel about the integrity of their elections in their states. I know that Donald Trump, I think either today or yesterday, just signed an executive order about putting in place national election standards, such as making sure you have some sort of citizenship that you can present when you're voting, as well as making sure that you have to have, if you're doing a mail-in ballot, it has to be received before election day to be counted. So I think this is all great things, and I'm interested to see where this goes, and we will be sure to keep you updated on all of these stories as they become available. But with that, that is the end of today's show. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Spin Cycle Live. Make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube, on Rumble. Give me a follow on X. Give me a follow on Instagram. Give me a follow on TikTok, right? X is where I'm mainly at. X is my biggest platform. It's where all the updates on the show are going to be at. You can stream it on X. If you missed the show, you're coming in late, you can watch the recap of this show over on YouTube, on Rumble, as well as on my X feed if you want to see that or not. I hope you all are doing so good. I hope you all enjoyed the show. Make sure you share it with friends. Let people know how great the show is. Let people know how great I am. Share my account with people. Say, hey, that kid, he's a really great guy. He's really good. His show's fabulous. It's such a good show. It is the best. It's the best news show in the land, right? We give you all the good news. We roll through it nice and quickly with some nice. I think I have the best opinions. I think my opinions are so good. They're the best opinions on the internet, right? So with that, I hope you all have a great rest of your week. We will see you back here on Monday, 5 p.m. Eastern Time for our next episode of Spin Cycle Live. Have a great weekend. Have a great rest of your week. Enjoy it. Spend some time with your family. Go out and enjoy the beautiful weather we are having, especially here in the Midwest, if that's where you live. And with that, I will see you all on Monday. Peace out.